Several potential electrical code violations are present in this residential service panel arrangement. The first issue involves cable connector overfusing. The 60 amp service panel is protected by 60 amp service entrance conductors. However, the cables connecting the panels are apparently only rated for 30 amps. This discrepancy constitutes a code violation. Cables rated for a lower amperage than the circuit protection could overheat, creating a significant fire hazard. It is critical that the conductors are appropriately sized for the overcurrent protection being provided. The second potential problem is plug overfusing. The description doesn't clearly indicate whether the plug fuse holders in the 30 amp panel are overfused relative to the circuit wires they protect. Overfusing, which is the practice of using fuses with a higher amperage rating than the wires they are supposed to protect, is a dangerous practice. It prevents the fuses from properly interrupting the circuit in the event of an overload or short circuit, again dramatically increasing the risk of electrical fires. Proper fuse sizing is essential for electrical safety. The third issue relates to the ambiguous use of the 30 amp panel. It's unclear whether the individual countertop range branch circuit wires and the two plug fuse holders within the 30 amp panel are connected to the same circuit breaker or to separate breakers. If all these loads are connected to a single circuit breaker, the total load imposed in the circuit could easily exceed the panel's rated capacity. This would be a clear violation of electrical codes. Branch circuits need to be designed and implemented to ensure that they are not overloaded. Fourthly, the absence of proper labeling poses a safety concern. The description doesn't mention whether the panels are adequately labeled. Proper labeling should clearly indicate the circuits that each breaker or fuse controls. The presence of a main breaker or fuse for each panel is important for quickly disconnecting power in an emergency or for maintenance. Lack of labeling makes it difficult to identify and isolate circuits, increasing the risk of accidents and electrical shock. Fifth, the unknown range rating presents a problem. Without knowing the electrical rating of the countertop range in terms of its voltage and amperage requirements, it is difficult to determine whether the individual branch circuit wires and the panel's overall capacity are sufficient to safely and reliably support the range's electrical load. The range's amperage draw must be considered when evaluating the circuit and panel capacity. Regarding additional considerations, it is important to discuss the grounded neutral conductor. The description does not specify whether the grounded neutral conductor is properly connected throughout the electrical system. Improper grounding can lead to numerous electrical hazards, including electric shock, equipment damage, and fire. The grounding system must be correctly installed and maintained to ensure safety. The service disconnect for the air conditioner should be clearly labeled as such. It also must be easily accessible in the event of an emergency. Quick access to the service disconnect is critical for safely shutting down power to the air conditioner during maintenance or in the event of a malfunction. To further elaborate, it is important to consider the National Electrical Code requirements for residential service panels. The NEC provides comprehensive guidelines for the safe and proper installation of electrical systems. These guidelines are intended to minimize the risk of electrical hazards and ensure the reliable operation of electrical equipment. Firstly, the NEC dictates that all electrical work must be performed by qualified and licensed electricians. This requirement ensures that individuals performing electrical installations have the necessary knowledge and experience to do the work safely and in compliance with applicable codes. Secondly, the NEC specifies the types and sizes of conductors that must be used for different types of circuits. Conductors must be sized appropriately to handle the expected load and to prevent overheating. NEC Table 310.15 provides guidance on conductor ampacity. Thirdly, the NEC requires that all electrical circuits be protected by overcurrent devices such as circuit breakers or fuses. Overcurrent devices are designed to interrupt the flow of electricity in the event of an overload or short circuit, thereby preventing damage to equipment and reducing the risk of fire. Fourthly, the NEC mandates that all electrical equipment be properly grounded. Grounding provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, tripping the overcurrent device and energizing the circuit. This helps to protect against electric shock and equipment damage. Fifthly, the NEC requires that all electrical panels and enclosures be properly labeled. Labeling should clearly indicate the circuits that each breaker or fuse controls. Proper labeling is essential for safety and maintenance. Sixthly, the NEC specifies the minimum working clearances that must be maintained around electrical equipment. These clearances provide sufficient space for electricians to safely work on the equipment. Seventhly, the NEC requires that all electrical installations be inspected and approved by a qualified electrical inspector. Inspection helps to ensure that the installation complies with the NEC and is safe for use. In the context of the described residential service panel arrangement, several specific NEC violations may be present. The overfusing of the cable connectors is a violation of NEC section 240.4, which prohibits the use of overcurrent devices that are rated higher than the ampacity of the conductors they protect. The ambiguous use of the 30-amp panel may violate NEC section 210.22, which limits the amount of load that can be connected to a single branch circuit. The lack of labeling is a violation of NEC section 110.22, which requires that all electrical equipment be clearly and legibly marked. The unknown range rating makes it difficult to determine whether the installation complies with NEC section 220.55, which provides guidelines for calculating the load of household ranges. The potential for improper grounding is a violation of NEC section 250.4, which requires that all electrical systems be properly grounded. Regarding the service disconnect for the air conditioner, NEC section 225.31 requires that the disconnecting means be readily accessible. Additionally, it is important to consider the local electrical codes and regulations that may be in effect. Local codes may be more stringent than the NEC and may impose additional requirements. It is always best to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that all electrical work is performed in compliance with applicable codes and regulations. In summary, the described residential service panel arrangement presents several potential electrical code violations. These violations could create significant safety hazards and should be addressed by a qualified electrician as soon as possible. Proper cable sizing, fuse selection, circuit loading, labeling, grounding, and service disconnect accessibility are essential for ensuring the safe and reliable operation of the electrical system. The lack of information about the countertop range makes it impossible to determine if it is appropriately connected. For example, a typical 240-volt range rated at 40 amps will require a 50-amp breaker and appropriately sized conductors. If the range is rated at 30 amps, then a 40-amp breaker and appropriately sized conductors are required. And if the range is rated at 20 amps, then it will require a 30-amp breaker and appropriately sized conductors. Consult NEC Table 220.55 for range load calculations. It is also important to note that the NEC requires that all electrical work be performed in a neat and workmanlike manner. This means that all conductors should be properly supported, that all connections should be tight and secure, and that the overall installation should be aesthetically pleasing. Sloppy or unprofessional electrical work can be a sign of underlying problems and should be investigated by a qualified electrician. Furthermore, it is important to periodically inspect and maintain electrical equipment. Electrical panels should be checked for signs of corrosion, damage, or overheating. Circuit breakers should be tested to ensure that they are functioning properly. Grounding connections should be inspected to ensure that they are tight and secure. Regular maintenance can help to prevent electrical problems from developing and can extend the life of electrical equipment. Finally, it is important to remember that electricity is dangerous. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, you should always hire a qualified electrician to do the work for you. Attempting to perform electrical work without the proper knowledge and experience can be hazardous and can result in serious injury or even death.